Hi, I'm Rabbi Ain, and this is your Take Home Torah for Friday, January 15th, 2021. Welcome to Congregation Beth Sholom's Torah. We do this every week. If you haven't signed up, I encourage you to subscribe to our page so that you can see these, which are published every Friday. This week's Torah portion is Vaera, and in it, Moses confronts Pharaoh and asks him to let Moses' people go, and we hear of the first 7 plagues which God rains down upon the Egyptian people. But it is also, as we know, Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, and we are going to be inaugurating a new president next week. And the first couple of weeks of 2021 have been filled with violence and hatred and anger and tears. And so, in a moment of profound instability and transition and vulnerable hope in our national political life, what the Beth Sholom community is doing is creating a space through this Take Home Torah and also through a concert, which will premiere tomorrow night at 7 p.m., Saturday night at 7 p.m., to celebrate the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the pursuit of racial justice, featuring the Fraternal Order of the Society Blues. Our Listen series curator, Dr. Jeremiah Lockwood, will be joined by lifelong friends Ricky Gordon from the Wynton Marsalis Orchestra and Ernesto Gomez from the Brotherhood of the Jug. They'll be playing blues and gospel songs that they learned from their mentor, the legendary Piedmont blues master Carolina Slim. And tomorrow night at 7 p.m., they'll play music and share memories about their years with Carolina Slim and have an opportunity to contemplate on the future of our pursuit of justice and the role that music can play in establishing the future that we're looking for. So with this concert tomorrow night and thinking about, well, what can I offer on this weekend of liberation, this weekend in which we honor the memory of Dr. King, I'm, forced to consider my own privilege. And what I wanted to do was to provide space to hear the voice of a black poet who is an essayist and a cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio. His name is Hanif Abdul-Rakib, and he's a passionate poet who really speaks to what we are experiencing in these times in a voice that I want to make space for here. And so let me just hold his book up. Here's one of his books. It's A Fortune for Your Disaster, poems by Hanif Abdul-Rakib. And the one poem that I want to read is titled, How Can Black People Write About Flowers at a Time Like This? And Hanif gives a little bit of an introduction to the poem and shares where it came from. And so I'm going to read that introduction, and then I'm going to leave you with the poem. And hopefully with the words of Hanif, the words of Dr. King, the words of our prophets, the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, we can come together as a people and hear the voice of prophecy and pursue justice and remember that on this weekend in which we recall Dr. King. So Hanif writes that I was reading shortly after, he writes, I was at a reading shortly after the election of 2012. And the poet who was black was reading gorgeous poems which had some consistent and exciting flower imagery. A woman who was white behind me, who thought she was whispering to her neighbor, said, how can black people write about flowers at a time like this? I thought it was so absurd in a way that didn't make me angry but made me curious. What is the black poet to be writing about at a time like this, if not to dissect the attractiveness of a flower, that which can arrive beautiful and then slowly die right before our eyes? I thought flowers were the exact thing to write about at a time like this. So I began this series of poems, all with the same title. I thought it was much better to grasp a handful of different flowers, put them in a glass box, and see how many angels I could find. in our shared eventual demise. Here is his poem. How can black people write about flowers at a time like this? Dear reader, with our heels digging into the good mud at a swamp's edge, you might tell me something about the dandelion and how it is not a flower itself, but a plant made up of several small flowers at its crown. And Lord knows I have been called by what I look like more than I have been called by what I actually am. And I wish to return the favor for the purpose of this exercise, which too is an attempt at fashioning something pretty out of seeds refusing to make anything worthwhile of their burial. Size me up and skip whatever semantics arrive to the tongue first. Say, that boy, he looked like a hollowed out grandfather clock. He looked like $1 million God with a 2-cent heaven. Like all it takes is one kiss, and before morning, you could scatter his whole mind across a field. Shabbat Shalom.